How's it going, everyone? Welcome back to Boylei Hobby Time. This week I decided to build a little diorama featuring Mando's new ship from the book of Boba Fett. The ship is 110 millimeters, so I needed to figure out the scale of this thing. I used this little piece of balsa wood as a placeholder for the ship because I was printing the ship while I filmed this section. I cut down the foam to the right size and I used a makeshift compass to draw a portion of the circle where the back of the diorama will be. I then busted out the hot wire table and I used it like a scroll saw to carve away the foam in that half circle as neatly as possible. As neatly as possible still left a lot to be desired. So I put on my respirator and I sanded the edge smooth. I then used this method to figure out the length of that rounded section. I cut out some thin pieces of foam to that length. Then I traced out the shape of the recessed area on the back wall. I carved it out using my hobby knife with a nice sharp cutting edge. Some helpful tips that I've learned from experience or on the internet are when you're cutting foam and you're not getting nice clean cuts, it's likely that your blade is not sharp enough. Also, if you want nice clean corners, start in the corner and cut away from the corner. And lastly, it's best to use multiple soft passes as opposed to one hard pass. I then glued all of the foam pieces together, and I was a little concerned that the pink foam on the back would break when I bent it, but I warmed it up with a hairdryer first, and it worked out alright. Then it was time to put on some greeblies. Then it was time to put on some spackle. I covered the diorama with some spackle that I borrowed from scratch bashing. Once that was thoroughly covered with multiple layers, I left it to dry. Then it was time to move on to Mando's ship. This custom N1 Starfighter was designed by James from the Rebel Base build. James has an awesome channel with fun homemade props and miniatures, and all of his 3D designs are available on his Patreon. If you're a Star Wars fan, or into 3D printing, or both, you should definitely go check that out. He does great work. I then painted the ship with a metallic silver spray paint and began the painting process. Now I have to say that when I saw the N1 reintroduced as the ship that Mando was going to be flying, I was a little surprised. I wasn't necessarily disappointed, I was just surprised. I thought he was going to get a larger ship. I don't think that this one would make sense as a bounty hunting ship, which maybe that's the intention, that this is him finally saying goodbye to the life of a bounty hunter. I would like to see maybe at some point a bigger ship for him. Maybe he can dock this inside of, but that's just me. Let me know in the comments, what do you think? What do you think about Mando's new ship? I had forgotten, but a while ago I purchased this liquid mirror from Culture Hustle and I had never used it. So I decided to throw that on just to see what happened, and I have to say I was shocked at how shiny that was. I took the opportunity to print a little Mando from Galactic Armory and use it on his armor as well. The stuff is very, very impressively shiny. Seriously, I am blown away. After the spackle was dry, then it was time to add the greeblies. I have to say, in the future, I will add a protective layer of Mod Podge onto the foam before adding the spackle. The spackle gives a very nice texture, like stucco, but does not protect the foam as well as the Mod Podge does. So some super glue got through in a few places, caused some melting. Luckily it's not super visible, but Mod Podge in the future just to be sure. I used my heat gun to heat up some styrene tubes that I bent at a 90-degree angle. Luckily, styrene is nice and soft, so it is not a risk to cut it with my God hand nippers. After I had glued all of those in place, it was time to prime. In case you aren't familiar with the backdrop for this diorama, it is Hangar 3-5, which is the docking bay that Mando likes to park at on his trips to Tatooine. It's the one that's operated by Peli Moto.
And that is a crazy lady.
I gave the walls and the ground a Tatooine color scheme, and then I painted up all the greeblies. After that, I added some sand to the ground. This was some powderized sand that I had never used before, and unfortunately it got onto some of the greeblies and was unable to come off. I thought I was going to be able to just brush it right off if it got on them, but even though they were not covered with glue, the sand would not come off. It actually stuck like a pigment. I was kind of surprised by that. In the end though, it is Tatooine, everything does get covered in sand, so it wasn't too big of a deal. I drilled a hole in the bottom of the ship. I wanted this to be kind of suspended off the ground ever so slightly. The ship does not have landing gear that I know of, it just kind of floats there. So I put in a little brass rod. I painted the sides of the diorama with some black 3.0, and the very last thing to do was to stick the ship and Mando in place. And I called it good. That is it for this video. Thank you all so much for watching. Thanks again to Rebel Base Build for giving me that N1 file. Go check out his channel. I know he's working on a build of his own with the N1 in a much larger scale. That will be a lot of fun. You should go check that out and subscribe to his channel. Huge shout out and thank you as always to all of my patrons. You guys are great. Have an awesome week, everyone. I'll see you next time.